I guess it also spilled over on the cups and saucers.
No, that's glue. I did that to keep the cup and saucer together.
It ran for 6 seasons on CBS, introduced America to a glamorous Hungarian socialite who couldn't cook, a city lawyer who couldn't farm, and a pig who got more fan mail than most of the human cast. Green Acres premiered on September 15, 1965, and the people who made Hooterville come alive each week had careers and stories that went far beyond anything the Haney Rolling Store ever delivered. Here is the Green Acres cast, then and now in 2026, and the question is whether you'd recognize them. The show that should not have worked. Green Acres was created by Jay Summers and produced by Paul Henning, the same Paul Henning who had already given CBS the Beverly Hillbillies and Petticoat Junction. CBS offered Henning a third half-hour slot without requiring a pilot, an unusual gesture of confidence that reflected how well the rural comedy formula was performing in the mid-1960s. What Henning and Summers actually made was something stranger than the premise suggested. The Hooterville of Green Acres operated by its own internal logic. The farmhand was occasionally more useful than his employer. The county agent could never complete a sentence. And the local pig, Arnold Ziffel, received more fan mail than most of the human cast. Its real engine was not the fish out of water setup, but the chemistry between its two leads. Eddie Albert and Eva Gabor were two people who disagreed about almost everything and genuinely liked each other anyway, and that gave the show a warmth that no amount of pig-related plotting could manufacture. Eddie Albert, Oliver Wendell Douglas. Oliver Wendell Douglas was a New York City attorney who dreamed of being a farmer. He got what he asked for: a broken-down farmhouse, a reluctant pig, a county agent who could never finish a sentence, and a wife who brought her Manhattan wardrobe to the middle of nowhere and saw no reason to change a thing. Eddie Albert played Oliver for all 170 episodes, and the role became the thing most people know him for. What most people don't know is that by the time Green Acres premiered in 1965, Albert had already lived enough for several lifetimes. He was born Edward Albert Heimberger on April 22, 1906, in Rock Island, Illinois, the oldest of 5 children of a realtor and his wife. He dropped his last name early in his career when a radio announcer kept introducing him as Eddie Hamburger, so he used his middle name as his surname instead, and Eddie Albert he remained. In the 1920s and 1930s, he worked as a circus trapeze artist, a radio singer with a trio, a vaudeville performer, and eventually a Broadway actor. His stage career included the long-running military comedy Brother Rat in 1936, which he repeated for the film version at Warner Brothers and which established him in Hollywood. Before that, during the late 1930s and the run-up to World War II, Albert was recruited by the United States government to conduct intelligence work in Mexican waters. He went on what appeared to be pleasure sailing expeditions along the Baja California coast, reporting back on Nazi and Japanese activities and infrastructure he observed at ports and in coastal areas. When the war began, he enlisted in the United States Navy, eventually achieving the rank of lieutenant, and served in the South Pacific Theater. During the Battle of Tarawa in November 1943, one of the most brutal engagements of the Pacific Campaign, fought on a small coral atoll in the Gilbert Islands where the Marines suffered catastrophic casualties in a matter of hours, Albert piloted a small boat repeatedly under sustained enemy fire to rescue wounded Marines stranded on the beach. He made multiple trips. He saved the lives of more than 50 men. He was awarded the Bronze Star with a V for Valor. He would say, consistently for the rest of his life, that the Bronze Star meant more to him than any acting award. After the war, he returned to Hollywood and built a substantial film career that has been somewhat overshadowed by Green Acres in the public memory. His first Academy Award nomination came in 1954 for Roman Holiday, in which he played Irving Radovich. the cheerful, slightly rumpled photographer friend of Gregory Peck's character Joe Bradley, as Audrey Hepburn's princess explored Rome incognito. It was a warm, unshowy performance in a film of real charm, and it earned him genuine industry recognition. His second Oscar nomination came in 1973 for The Heartbreak Kid, directed by Elaine May, in which he played the suburban father of Sybil Shepherd's character, the sort of solid, recognizable American figure Albert could build entirely from the inside out. He also appeared in Oklahoma in 1955, Tea House of the August Moon, The Sun Also Rises, and The Longest Yard in 1974, where he played the corrupt warden of a southern prison. His range across comedy, drama, and musical theater was real and consistent across a career that spanned more than 60 years. Beyond acting, Albert was among the most committed environmental and humanitarian activists in Hollywood at a time when such commitments were neither fashionable nor professionally advantageous. He campaigned against the use of DDT before it was widely understood as dangerous. He worked for the preservation of endangered species. He fought to clean up Santa Monica Bay. He worked with Meals for Millions, a nonprofit addressing global hunger, and his sustained advocacy helped contribute to the founding of the first Earth Day, which was held on April 22, 1970. April 22nd was Eddie Albert's birthday. The date was chosen partly in his honor. He was labeled a communist during the Red Scare of the 1950s, a designation that, by multiple accounts, curtailed what might have been an even larger film career. But he never wavered from the political and social commitments that had attracted the accusation. After Green Acres ended in 1971, Albert continued working steadily. The crime drama switch ran from 1975 to 1978 on CBS, with Albert playing a veteran private investigator alongside Robert Wagner. He had a recurring role as Carlton Travis on Falcon Crest during the 1980s, opposite Jane Wyman. He and Eva Gabor reunited on Broadway in 1983 in a production of You Can't Take It With You, and both appeared in the 1990 television movie Return to Green Acres. He was married to the Mexican actress and dancer known as Margot. Born Maria Margarita Guadalupe Teresa Estela Bolado Castilla y O'Donnell, from 1945 until her death in 1985. Their son, Edward Albert Jr., became an actor and was his father's primary caregiver during the years Eddie Albert battled Alzheimer's disease. Despite the illness, Albert remained physically active, exercising regularly until approximately 1 month before his death. Eddie Albert died on May 26, 2005, in Pacific Palisades, California. He was 99 years old, pneumonia, at the end of a life of extraordinary breadth. He was buried at Westwood Village Memorial Park Cemetery in Los Angeles, just yards from Eva Gabor, who had predeceased him by 10 years. His son, Edward Albert Jr., died in 2006 at age 55 from lung cancer, 1 year after his father. Eva Gabor, Lisa Douglas. Lisa Douglas was the kind of woman who brought a trunk full of Paris gowns to a farmhouse with holes in the walls and managed to make that seem entirely reasonable. She didn't cook, or tried to, with results that defied the laws of chemistry. She didn't understand what Oliver was always going on about with his corn and his soil and his improving relations with the neighbors. She fundamentally disagreed with the entire premise of the adventure. And yet she was the one person in Hooterville who seemed genuinely, effortlessly at home anywhere she happened to be standing. Eva Gabor played her for all 170 episodes, and the warmth between her and Eddie Albert, entirely genuine, both on screen and off, was what held the show together when everything else was gloriously falling apart. Eva Gabor was born on February 11, 1919, in Budapest, Hungary. She was the youngest of 3 daughters of Vilmos Gabor, a soldier, and Jolie Gabor, a jeweler and socialite who would eventually become almost as famous as her daughters. Her sisters were Magda and Zadziza. Together, they constituted one of the most photographed, most publicized, and most reliably entertaining families in American popular culture for 3 decades. The Gabors arrived from Hungary as Europe moved toward catastrophe, and they made themselves into a distinctly American phenomenon of celebrity, glamour, and multiple marriages. Jadzia became famous for being Jadzia. Eva worked at becoming an actress. She was the first of the 3 sisters to emigrate to the United States, arriving in the late 1930s. She worked in films and on Broadway through the 1940s and 1950s. Her Broadway debut came in The Happy Time in 1950, a production that established her as a legitimate stage performer rather than simply a famous name. Her most notable film role before Green Acres was as Liane d'Excelmans in the 1958 musical Gigi, alongside Leslie Caron, Louis Jourdan, and Maurice Chevalier, the film that swept that year's Academy Awards, winning the Best Picture Oscar among 9 total wins. She appeared in It Started With a Kiss in 1959 with Glenn Ford and Debbie Reynolds. Her face and her accent and her specific quality of high-spirited European glamour made her a recognizable figure in Hollywood and on television through the early 1960s. She had also, by the time Green Acres began, been married 5 times. Her marriages were to Eric Valdemar Drimmer, 1937 to 1942, Charles Isaacs, 1943 to 1949, John Elbert Williams, 1956 to 1957, Richard Brown, 1959 to 1973, and Frank Gard Jameson Sr., 1973 to 1983. The 5 marriages and 5 divorces were frequently cited as a shared family characteristic. Jadzia was married 9 times, and Eva handled the subject with the same combination of humor and deflection that characterized everything else about her public persona. As Lisa Douglas across 170 episodes, Eva Gabor created a character that was simultaneously comic and genuinely endearing in ways that the writing alone couldn't account for. The premise was that Lisa was absurdly out of place, but Gabor played her as someone who brought exactly what she had to any situation and found it entirely sufficient. Lisa's incomprehension of rural life was never mean-spirited or contemptuous. It was the incomprehension of someone who genuinely couldn't imagine why anyone would want things to be different from how she experienced them. That quality required real generosity from the performer, and Gabor brought it consistently across 6 years. After Green Acres, she became a significant voice actress for Disney in a run of roles that used her particular sound: warm, slightly accented, fundamentally optimistic, even in complicated circumstances. With genuine creative intelligence, she voiced Duchess, the elegant Parisian mother cat in The Aristocats in 1970. She voiced Miss Bianca, the cultured and resourceful Hungarian mouse representative in The Rescuers in 1977. She reprised Miss Bianca in The Rescuers Down Under in 1990. The 3 Disney voice roles gave her a second generation of fans who knew her primarily through those films and who had no idea she had spent 6 seasons in Hooterville. She also launched a commercial enterprise that was more substantial than a celebrity sideline. Eva Gabor International, her wig business, was founded in 1972 and became a genuinely successful operation. She was involved in marketing fashion and beauty products across the following decade. In 1983, she and Eddie Albert reunited on Broadway for a revival of You Can't Take It With You, in which she played the Grand Duchess Olga Katrina. The production demonstrated to anyone who might have wondered that their chemistry was entirely intact 12 years after the show had ended. In 1990, the 2 of them and most of the original Green Acres cast assembled for Return to Green Acres, a television movie that brought Oliver and Lisa and Mr. Haney and Ebb and Hank Kimball and Sam Drucker back to Hooterville 19 years after the rural purge. The audience response was warm and immediate. Eva Gabor died on July 4, 1995 in Los Angeles. She was 76. The cause was respiratory failure and pneumonia following a fall in a bathtub while she was on vacation in Mexico. The fall itself happened in Mexico. She was transported back to Los Angeles, but she never recovered. Her funeral was held on July 11, 1995, at Good Shepherd Catholic Church in Beverly Hills. She was the youngest of the three Gabor sisters, and she was the first to die, predeceasing Magda, who died in June 1997, her mother Jolie, who died in April 1997, and Jadza, who lived until December 2016. She is buried at Westwood Village Memorial Park Cemetery, a few yards from Eddie Albert, who outlived her by a decade. Their grave markers are close enough together that visitors to the cemetery often find them within a single quiet walk. The two of them, who were never romantically involved, but who were, by every account, genuinely devoted friends, ended up spending their final rest within yards of each other in the same small cemetery in Los Angeles. Pat Buttram, Mr. Haney. Mr. Haney was the rolling store salesman of Hooterville, a man who could produce from the back of his truck any item Oliver Douglas happened to need, at a price that was invariably unfair, and in a condition that was invariably questionable. He was the show's engine of chaos, the mechanism by which perfectly reasonable plans became completely unreasonable outcomes. And he did it all with an air of cheerful goodwill that never let you quite hate him for it. Pat Buttram played him across 147 episodes with a quality of gravel-voiced, permanently self-interested optimism that became one of the most recognizable character turns of 1960s American television. Maxwell Emmett Buttram was born on June 19, 1915, in Addison, Alabama, the son of Wilson McDaniel Buttram, a Methodist minister, and his wife, Mary Emmett Maxwell. He was the second of two sons, and he grew up in the orbit of his father's itinerant ministry across Alabama, Nauvoo, Double Springs, various small towns throughout the state. He attended Birmingham Southern College with an initial intention of following his father into the ministry, but entertainment redirected him. He performed in college theatrical productions and on a local radio station before finding his way to the WLS National Barn Dance in Chicago, the long-running live radio variety program that was one of the dominant entertainment institutions of the American Midwest. At WLS, he developed the comedic persona, the slightly hapless country character with the voice that never quite settled on a key, that would define his work for the following 5 decades. He described his voice himself as having never quite made it through puberty and as sounding like a handful of gravel thrown in a mixmaster. The voice was instantly recognizable and impossible to mistake for anyone else. He came to Hollywood in the 1940s and initially tried to secure a role as sidekick to Roy Rogers. But Rogers already had a full supporting cast, and Buttram was passed over. Gene Autry recently returned from his World War II service in the Army Air Force, where he had flown C-47 transport planes in the European and Pacific theaters, needed a new comedic partner and took Buttram on. The collaboration became one of the more durable partnerships in the Western genre. Buttram appeared with Autry in more than 40 films and more than 100 episodes of The Gene Autry Show, which ran on television from 1950 to 1956. Buttram replaced Smiley Burnett, who had found other work during Autry's wartime absence, and made the sidekick role entirely his own. In September 1950, during the filming of a Gene Autry television episode called The Peacemaker, Buttram was seriously injured in what was described as an accident on set. The injury was severe enough to require 4 blood transfusions, with plasma being flown in from nearby 29 Palms. Autry was at his side during the medical crisis. Buttram was hospitalized for 10 weeks and required other actors to fill in as Autry's sidekick during the first television season while he recovered. He came back fully, and the partnership continued. Alfred Hitchcock cast him in 2 episodes of The Alfred Hitchcock Hour in the early 1960s, an unusual deployment of Buttram's talent that surprised people who knew him only from westerns and country comedy, and that demonstrated there was considerably more available when the material called for it. After Green Acres, Buttram's career in voice acting for Disney constituted something close to a parallel career. He played Napoleon the Hound Dog in The Aristocats in 1970. He played the scheming Sheriff of Nottingham, a wolf, in Robin Hood in 1973. He played Chief the Hunting Dog in The Fox and the Hound in 1981. He appeared in Who Framed Roger Rabbit in 1988. His final voice credit was in A Goofy Movie, released in 1995, 1 year after his death. In 1982, he founded the Golden Boot Awards, an annual ceremony honoring contributions to the Western film genre, with proceeds going to the Motion Picture and Television Fund. He was a toastmaster of considerable wit and in constant demand for industry events. His after-dinner humor, which was considerably drier and more sophisticated than his country character suggested, was quoted in the Hollywood community for decades. His wife, actress Sheila Ryan, whom he had met on the set of the 1950 film Mule Train and married on December 26, 1952, died in November 1975. Buttram never remarried. Pat Buttram died on January 8, 1994, in Los Angeles. He was 78. His body was returned to Alabama, and he was buried at Maxwell Chapel United Methodist Church Cemetery in Haleyville, Alabama, returning, in the end, to the Methodist tradition of the father he had once intended to follow. Tom Lester, Eb Dawson. Eb Dawson was the Douglases' farmhand, a young man of limited sophistication but considerable goodwill, who called Oliver Dad and Lisa Mom with a persistence that neither of them had quite authorized, but neither could quite object to. He was useful around the farm in the same way that most things in Hooterville were useful, not in any way that Oliver had intended, but in some way that usually worked out. He appeared in 150 episodes, and Tom Lester, who played him, was something that no one else in the main cast could claim. He was young. Thomas Lester was born on September the 23rd, 1938, in Laurel, Mississippi. He was 26 years old when Green Acres premiered in September 1965. Eddie Albert was 59, Eva Gabor was 46, Pat Buttram was 50, Frank Cady was 49, Alvy Moore was 43. Almost the entire regular cast was in their 40s and 50s, working from a foundation of experience and technique that television comedy in that era required, and that you could see operating in every episode. Lester was the exception. Genuinely young, genuinely inexperienced relative to his colleagues, and playing a character whose inexperience was the entire point. The contrast gave Eb Dawson a quality of authentic guilelessness that the show needed, and that Lester supplied naturally. After the series ended in 1971, Lester made a professional choice that was unlike anything the rest of the cast did. He became an ordained Christian minister. He devoted himself to faith work and continued farming. The agricultural life that had been the premise of the show was, for Lester, an actual life and rather than a comic backdrop. He appeared at fan conventions and nostalgia events over the years, maintaining a connection to the audience that had grown up watching him. And he appeared in the 1990 reunion movie, Return to Green Acres. But the entertainment industry was no longer the center of what he was doing. He was also, by the end, the last surviving regular cast member of the show. He had been the youngest to join. He outlived Eddie Albert, Eva Gabor, Pat Buttram, Frank Cady, Alvy Moore, Mary Grace Canfield, Barbara Pepper, And Hank Patterson, the young man of the cast, was the one who lasted. Tom Lester died on April 20th, 2020 in Laurel, Mississippi, the same town where he had been born 81 years earlier. The cause was complications from Parkinson's disease. Frank Cady, Sam Drucker. Sam Drucker was the general store owner in Hooterville. Calm, practical, mildly bewildered by the world around him, but fundamentally reliable. A man who had seen everything and remained unshaken by any of it. He appeared in 142 episodes of Green Acres, and he had a distinction unique in the CBS rural comedy universe of the 1960s. He played the exact same character, Sam Drucker, simultaneously on two other shows. Petticoat Junction and the Beverly Hillbillies shared the fictional world of Hooterville with Green Acres, and Frank Cady's Sam Drucker appeared in all three, tying the three series together through the same general store, the same apron, and the same expression of patient, mild confusion. Frank Cady was born on September 8, 1915 in Susanville, California. He had a long career in film and television that began in the 1940s. He appeared in Billy Wilder's Ace in the Hole in 1951 as a hardware store owner, a small role in one of the most scathing American films of the decade. He had a role in Alfred Hitchcock's Rear Window in 1954, playing a man in the courtyard apartment building that constitutes most of the film's visible world. His face and his quality of unflappable normalcy made him one of the more useful character actors in American television through the 1960s. He was the sanest person in every room he appeared in across three different shows, which was precisely what the comedic anarchies of Green Acres, Petticoat Junction, and the Beverly Hillbillies required. His final acting performance was in the 1990 reunion movie Return to Green Acres. Frank Cady died on June 8, 2012 in Wilsonville, Oregon, at the age of 96. He was the longest-lived member of the principal Green Acres cast, outliving both the youngest cast member and the oldest, which says something about the unpredictability of these things. Alvy Moore, Hank Kimball. Hank Kimball was the Hooterville County Agricultural Agent, the official representative of the United States Department of Agriculture's Extension Services, whose primary qualification for the role appeared to be his ability to begin sentences and then get lost in them before they arrived anywhere. He would start to tell Oliver something useful and then trail off into a subordinate clause from which he never returned. He appeared in 142 episodes and was one of the show's most reliable comic mechanisms. A running joke about bureaucratic helplessness that never stopped working because Alvy Moore played it with absolute commitment. Alvy Moore was born on November 5, 1921 in Palermo, California. Beyond his acting work on Green Acres and its related shows, Moore was also a film and television producer, a professional dimension that is considerably less well-remembered than Hank Kimball, but that ran alongside his acting career for decades. He appeared in Return to Green Acres in 1990, completing one final circuit of Hooterville with most of the original cast. Alvy Moore died on May 4th, 1997 in Los Angeles. He was 75. Heart failure. Green Acres ran from September 15, 1965 to April the 27th, 1971. 6 seasons, 170 episodes, and a kind of sustained surrealism that television comedy rarely achieves and almost never maintains across that many episodes. The show worked not because it was absurd, but because the absurdity came from genuine character. Oliver's idealism, Lisa's imperviousness, Mr. Haney's cheerful dishonesty, Ebb's earnestness, Hank Kimball's perpetual sentence fragments, Sam Drucker's patient endurance of all of it. Each character had a specific internal logic, and the comedy came from watching those logics collide. The show was canceled in the rural purge of 1971 when CBS made the decision that its lineup of rural comedies skewed too old and too rural for the younger urban demographic the network wanted to attract. Shows that were still drawing solid ratings were simply ended, and Hooterville went quiet. The audience that had grown up watching Oliver lose arguments with Arnold the Pig and Lisa's cooking produce results that defied scientific explanation never really let go of the show. It went into syndication and stayed there. The cast reunited in 1990, 19 years after the series ended, for a television movie that found genuine audience warmth. These people were still those people, and the chemistry between Albert and Gabber was exactly what it had always been. Of the principals covered here, all are gone now in 2026. Eddie Albert, the Navy veteran, two-time Oscar nominee, Bronze Star recipient, and committed environmental activist who saved 50 men at Tarawa and helped inspire the first Earth Day, died in 2005 at 99. Eva Gabber, the Budapest-born socialite who gave voice to Duchess and Miss Bianca, and who made Hooterville feel like the most reasonable place in the world, as long as Lisa Douglas was standing in it, died in 1995 at 76. Pat Buttram, the Alabama minister's son who became Gene Autry's irreplaceable sidekick, and then one of the most beloved voice actors in Disney's animated history, died in 1994 at 78. Tom Lester, the only young person in the cast, who became a real minister and a real farmer after the cameras stopped, died in 2020 at 81. Frank Cady, who played Sam Drucker on 3 different shows simultaneously and outlived nearly all of his colleagues, died in 2012 at 96. Alvy Moore, who could never finish a sentence as Hank Kimball and always finished the laugh, died in 1997 at 75. The farmhouse was a set. The people who walked through it were real. If this kind of television history is what brings you here, hit that like button and subscribe. There's a lot more to come, and we'll see you for the next one.